Hot flash time?
Hello, good morning.
Can't compare.
Welcome to our retreat. 1.0, convene open session, procedural business, 9 a.m. 1.1.
Hang on. Okay, now.
Good morning. 1.0, convene open session, procedural business, 9 o'clock a.m. 1.1, call to order. The board retreat of the Room of the World Unified School District is called to order on July 23rd, 2021 at 9:04 a.m. 1.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish quorum. Deanna Ridland, Area 2. Cindy Gardner, Area 3.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5.
Phil Mellinger, trustee area 1.
Natalie Lindman, trustee area number 4.
1.3, Pledge of Allegiance, led by Jay Howard.
Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
2.0, adoption of agenda. 2.1, adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Natalie?
Second.
Cindy? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 3.0, reports and presentations. 3.1, student learning and achievement. District and systems on the move, accelerating student learning by harnessing innovative practices that reduce equity gaps and learning loss. Jay Westover, co-founder and chief learning officer, Innovate Ed. Welcome, Jay.
All right, so we'll call Jay to the podium, if that's where you feel comfortable speaking. You do have the presentation in your board folder, and it will be up on the screen as well. So welcome, Jay. Jay's been working with our district for over about a year now, right? And working with our principals and our leadership teams, and we have big plans for next year. So, and moving on to working with some district teams and site teams as well. So he's going to talk about the work that he's been doing at our sites and with our principals and mostly with Heather and then move on so that you understand where we're going for this focus on student achievement and instruction.
Well,
Welcome.
thank you. Good morning, members of the board. Oh, red is hot. Good morning, members of the board, Superintendent Murphy, members of cabinet. It's a pleasure to be here. I live in Riverside, and I'm pleased to say that the 45-minute drive was actually a 45-minute drive. Unfortunately, the temperature is about the same here, so I was expecting a little cooler, but I'm so glad to be with you. So our organization is Innovate Ed, and I just want to give you a little background. So I've known your superintendent for many years, back when she was in Coachella, and just pleased to have an opportunity to work with her again. And I've gotten to know the cabinet members and the principals, and it's a pleasure to work with. I find that your school district really wants to improve and wants to figure out ways to do that. So to kind of frame that and get to know me just a little bit. So I've been doing this work for about 20 years now and had an opportunity to document the work. So as some do, trying to make it more clear to all, we published a book in 2019 called Districts in the Move. The intention really is to help school districts figure out how to have that forward movement. And just to give you a backstory, the past year, as you can see in the slide, the conversations we've been having with cabinet and principals and coaches, which are very essential for a school district, are those bullet points are like, how do we create clarity of focus so the district goals are really clear and the priorities for running the school side are essential. what does it look like to have that strong culture of shared leadership and collaboration, and how do we refine that and strengthen it? And how do we develop the expertise so we can support all students in learning? Is there a framework we could have that would help all understand how to do that? And if we want to improve, we have to have a cycle of improvement. So what would that cycle look like? And I have to tell you, over the past year, there's nothing more than a sense of we want to do this, we have to figure out how to do it, and then the pandemic happened. And so as you can imagine, some of those priorities shift a little bit to just trying to get through the logistics and challenges. And so as we think about this conversation, I want to frame a much broader conversation. In March of 2020, we ended up writing an article about how do we move through this as educators. And you notice on the left-hand side, and I think it's pertinent to your school district, we had a lot of resolve because someone said this is going to last 2 weeks. And then it wasn't 2 weeks, right? And then we had to become resilient in how we're going to approach this. And then as we return, whether it's hybrid or we remain distance learning, how do we reduce variability in student learning? So up until now, we've been resolute in our focus. We've tried to return the way that students can learn. And now we're in stages 4 and 5. And what I find really compelling on a personal level with Run of the World is like the idea of reimagination. Like, how do we come back into this educational environment and figure out how to better serve our students? And that's the conversation, right? And then, you know, what I've heard, and I was with some colleagues yesterday, some superintendents and others, and what I find in communities, I grew up in Pennsylvania, a small town of 2,000. And when you're in Pennsylvania and you're in a small community, you're kind of a member of that community after your second or third generation. So it's like, there's like a long-standing idea, you know everyone. And so that idea of like reculturing and changing practice, sometimes in communities is kind of difficult, right? It's just like a way we do things. So I think if we were to reimagine learning that's better for kids, the idea of reculturing schools, so that's the work, is not a small task, but that's the task at hand. And just to frame it a little bit from a board member's perspective, I would say that when you decide to do this work, you have to think about risks and rewards. And here's a diagram that I think explains it. And it talks about this work, because now I'm thinking I'm one of your principals. And I've had these conversations with principals and with cabinets, is there are some people that automatically go back to the idea of fortification. I want to go back to the past. This is how I've done things. And I think we recognize that some of that might be present in any school district. So but that's a high risk low reward conversation, right? And then there are others that say, well, we were doing some good things, why don't we just tweak it a little bit? But what if that's not good enough for kids? So that's another conversation we've been having is, do we simply just do a small incremental change, and sharpen the saw, what if that's not good enough? So the conversation I've been having, now this is not your school district, it's me, is some might think innovation is like a crazy person's, venture, but innovation is something more like, we've been doing something this way for the past 19 years, and we haven't gotten the result we like. Do we continue it, which is iteration, or do we replace it and do something better? And that's innovation. It's like finding a better way to do something. So I would say that what we're going to talk about today is, are there things that we can become more innovative? And innovative doesn't mean like technology driven. It means, is there a better approach or a better way? And for some school districts, very few, I was with one yesterday, there's transformation. And just give you an example, one of my colleagues, Chris Steinhauser, who was superintendent in Long Beach Unified School District for 18 years, here's what he said. He's a trustee, one of the trustees from the California State University system. He said, we have never had an opportunity like this in education history, and we just can't get it wrong. So how do we attend to this work in a way in which we make a difference? Because we'll never have this great reset again. So we have to make a choice. And that slide kind of describes a choice. Do we go back to the past? Do we slightly change something we've done before? Do we decide what to do better and differently and be a little bit more innovative approach? Or do we take a risk and say there are some things we could actually transform? So I just want to stop for a moment so we can have a conversation if you'd like to. There have been many challenges in school districts, and I think that the same is happening in your school districts. I kind of framed it from the idea that there are some big ideas like clarity of focus, shared leadership, expertise amongst all teachers and principals and coaches. And then we have to decide how to maybe reculture and reimagine what learning could look like. But we sometimes have to make a decision, like, do we go back to the past? Do we decide how to change something that may have worked? Or do we become more innovative in transformation? I don't know if the board has any thoughts or comments about that, but being more of a workshop conversation, just would like to entertain any dialogue that you'd like yourselves or maybe just take a pause.
You could take off your coat if you want. Tom.
I think what you're asking us to discuss is something that we really, I think that's something we can focus on today altogether is as being able to have this conversation in terms of vision, not in terms of the whole district vision, in terms of changing it, more in terms of in light of what's happened in the past year and a half. And the strange situation we find ourselves in now, being able to take advantage of the opportunities that this tragedy is so thrust upon us. And especially on our mountain, we are definitely, this is how we've always done things. But I do believe that our students probably benefit from some thoughtful change. And I'm concerned about imposing change on the district because there is that kind of taking the heels and kind of culture in some areas. However, our staff has shown some resilience in the past year and a half, 2 years. And I do believe among probably the majority, there is a desire to do some constructive change.
I would say in culture, in group, I think that being respectful of the traditions and the fact that we, like you were saying, in a small community, just have our ways and that we're proud of them and we want to retain some of those great ones. I think personally it's a challenge for me to think of innovative ways because I was raised here, I went to school here. So the status quo is very comfortable for me. And again, some of that is great. We need to keep many of those things, but you're right in regards to looking at a way forward. All it's education. We're supposed to be growing. We're supposed to be learning. We're supposed to be challenging ourselves. And if we're not doing that as a district or as a board, then it will not trickle down to our staff, to the students, to everyone, the whole community. So a different way, a different hat to wear than I typically do personally, but a necessary.
I'm one who likes change. I think change is exciting. Change is a part of life. Every single day is different, and it's what keeps life vital. And so, but what change, what transformation would really be significant? You don't want to go about changing everything. So transformation has to be very strategic, and a place that both makes a difference, but also probably has to be acceptable. So, because I think of the barriers to transformation, the barriers to change, and we already talked about it in that fortification. Most people are pretty comfortable where they're at, and that includes teachers and staff and everybody. You have things that you've been doing for years and systems that have worked. And so to transform them will take a significant amount of resistance to work through.
So I think, I also have to admit, Phil, I am I like change as well, as long as it's purposeful, not just for, not just for calendar reasons. I think that we have some real challenges, problems in the district that can be solved. And so if our focus is on our change being driven to solve a problem that we all agree upon is a problem, and stay focused on this is what we are trying to accomplish by this change, and message it, and be united in what we are trying to accomplish. I think that we need to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves now, but I also don't want to be like changing absolutely everything. We really need to have a scalpel here in terms of what we're trying to focus on, and make sure that we're being really excited, really precise about what it is we're trying to accomplish.
So when we talk about change, I mean, there are certain stories that have remained unchanged, and we're doing the same thing over and over and over and getting the same results. So when we talk about going back to the way things were, what we normally did, that wasn't good enough. We were still getting the same results over and over again, and in the different stories. So we also have an added component, especially exacerbated by the pandemic, which is the social, emotional, and mental health piece. And that is a layer that really hasn't risen to the top until lately, but it obviously needs to be interwoven within what we do and how we do it. And that, when you focus on that, will change practices and instructional practices and the way we handle things on our campuses by interweaving mental health and social emotional supports in it. But in terms of me, I mean, as a parent, when my kids were here, for me, it was super frustrating to see not a drive to change the story, but thinking we'll just do the same thing we've been doing, but we'll just do it better. Well, it hasn't, and the same story is existing. And so it's just unfortunate. Some of it's climate and culture. How do we change the climate and culture? And I'm not just talking about instructional practices, but on every single level. How do we change the climate and culture in order to affect change that's permanent and effective and changes the outcomes and the stories? And so that's the whole thing. Going back to what we were doing is not acceptable. I don't want to be like a complete fanatic that's making people go so far out of their comfort zone that Jordan is right, digging in their heels and saying, "Are you crazy? I'm not comfortable with this." So I'm more on the innovation side, but with, as Jordan has said, really looking at with this, I like that term, scalpel, of looking at how targeted and really focused ways to affect long-term outcomes that are positive for our students. And that includes parents and community. It's not just the young administrator and teacher. So that's more about the innovation, especially since we do have many that came in, and it's like, what can we start to affect change that is sustainable? So
I think I have to agree overall with what Dan and Cindy are saying, particularly in terms of scalpel, because I think depending on the area of our district, we are going to find ourselves being more iterative. For example, test scores. If we want test scores to improve, that's not going to improve twofold overnight. That might be iterative change. And we might look at things that are more innovative or transformative. For example, bringing a community liaison into our district now and incorporating that into our managerial area, level, that's transformative to try to really purposefully move towards engaging our community better. Portrait of a graduate, that's an indicative change. So I think depending on the area that we're looking at in our district, I think we'll find ourselves moving a little bit throughout here, if what I'm hearing from the rest of our board members schools. True.
Well, I just want to say that what I personally appreciate so much about this conversation is clearly as board members, you understand this concept, you're attentive to it, you're aware of it, you're appreciative of it. You're also acknowledge the community that you serve. And so it's not radical change. It's not a change that takes 20 years. It's measured, it's strategic, it's tactical. So that's the music in my ears. So I just want to thank you all for that conversation. So what's interesting with what you all mentioned, and this is part of our ongoing conversation, and as we think about the work now moving forward, the reason why this diagram is so important is change could be directed at the cabinet level with inclusion of the board. And you all said it very well. Sometimes that change is top down and it's not appreciated. And it's not welcomed. It's resistant. At the other extreme, you could go down to the bottom, which is like schools taking on innovation. Maybe they're being a cohort of your 3 elementary schools, and they have wonderful ideas, but we're not sure if at the board and cabinet level we have an agreement, right? And in the middle of that, you have ed services and the coaches that are working together. So as we think about the changes that occur, we want to be inclusive in a manner in which cabinets working directly with ed services and coaches and principals to figure out what change is appropriate. Principals are working with teachers and teachers with their parents and students, saying, what do you need? How can I serve you better? So there's like this feedback where there's inputs and outputs and conversation and dialogue. And I find that first part of that change process or group process is always about making sure there's common ground, common. So the last thing that we accomplished, the last day that I was here with the group, was what I would say is almost like draft, early version, not quite where it needs to be, but some guiding principles. And when I think of guiding principles, I've done strategic planning for school districts, large scale, whole community, year-long processes. And I've done short, guiding principles. What I find is that sometimes large strategic plans, if they aren't reinforced, consistency become a piece of paper on the wall. And so sometimes they're not understood by all, so there's misinterpretations. But a guiding principle becomes a little more of a, how would I see myself doing this? So what you just all articulated, the intent is, if these principles are attended to in place, then change and improvement will happen strategically. So like number one, all stakeholders, in the community want to have that strong system of improvements. And the district has to create the focus that down at the school level with teachers, they have to be driving the work. So it's district focused, but site driven. And we have to have that culture of candor and trust and collaboration, or else we may say one thing to each other, go back and really not take part. So like looking at culture. And number three, I really appreciate the framework that was earlier created with Heather and principals and coaches. Like, is there an instructional framework that isn't prescribed? Because I was a teacher, I'm an administrator. What I don't want is, here's how you teach tomorrow, and here's what you should be doing. Like, we have to give some autonomy to teachers, but they need direction. Because some teachers say, there's many things I can do, but what should I be focusing on, right? So an instructional framework gives guidance, but doesn't give prescription. So how do we create that balanced approach? And number four is, we think about change and inquiry. Here's the safest way to do that. Instead of saying, I'm going to change this, the better approach is, I want to make a change. In 4 weeks from today, I want to see if it works. So if change is an inquiry process, I think if I change this, I want to see improvement in 4 to 6 weeks. If it's working, let's keep it. If it's not, let's adjust it. Because some people fear change because they think everything's going to change. But when they hear, let's try it, very short. see if it works. If it does, fine tune. If it doesn't, stop. There's more of an openness to change, and we get it right because we improve slowly. And lastly, if I were to pick the most important team in your school district, I would say it's your instructional leadership team, the principal working with the teacher and the instructional coach. But how do we help them and support them in doing the work? And so when we think about change, whether they want to think about it or not, they are the change agents, right? Your principals and your teachers are the change agents with support from instructional coaches. How do we help them move into that improvement process and support them and build their capabilities? So these guiding principles were designed to maybe help people understand where we headed, what's it going to look like, what's it going to feel like, what might success be, and so we have some common ground, common thinking. And I have several more slides, but what I did want you to think as a board is that this was intended to be like a new strategic plan that needs to be board adopted. It's more of a conversation amongst leaders who are doing the work with instructional coaches, like what things should ground us so that we are engaging more together, and what guiding principles connect it. So that's the intent of the guiding principles, so that you can look at this and say, I wonder what people are working on and what they're grounded to. Oh, they're trying to build school leadership teams. Oh, they're trying to have this collaborative canvas conversation, effective feedback. I'm sure that makes sense to you all. You see it well. So that's the starting point. This actually was written, I think, in June, correct? Now I'd like to paint a picture as to what this might look like. And I want to answer many of your questions because you've had lots of thoughts, and I'll bring other people in the conversation. So there's been 4 key drivers that are part of this conversation, and they're really important. I appreciate Cindy's conversation about social emotional learning, because first we have to say, let's think of clarity and focus. What is most essential for our kids? So these are now and need to be continue to be in deep conversations. What is it that's most essential for our kids right now? I assume that in September, social emotional learning is going to be a priority. But by October, November, there'll be some leveling and stability, and we have to probably move into more of an academic support model. But there's a balanced approach. And then shared leadership implies that principals and teachers and district leaders are all working together. There's expertise. And what's really interesting, I'll just use social emotional learning again. That is a phrase spoken often, but there is not much clarity as to what that looks like and how to do it well. Right? It's just a phrase. So how do we build expertise and how do we continue to improve? So this is like a general framework. And so if I were to respond to all of you about how do we change, well, change is a process, right? First of all, what's the focus? What's the scalpel? What do we have to focus on? And then how do we work together on improving this? And then how do we build expertise so we can do it well? And then how do we keep fine tuning and improving? So it just becomes like a change strategy. This slide then will be, and has been, but we'll come back again very quickly when the school year starts, is my assumption. And I want to have this be a brief conversation if you're open to it. It's simple in nature, but really complex in execution. So the rock is what you as a school district want to see improvement in by the end of the school year. It's heavy, it's large, it has to be selected strategically. We can't carry too many rocks, so we have to decide what other rocks we need to carry. And on the right-hand side, they can be called pebbles. It's like, what do we want to see students doing or what supports they need? And the fear is in any school districts, especially in unified school districts, sometimes elementary schools put pebbles on that side. And then the middle school says, I don't like all those pebbles. I'm going to brush some of them off. When kids come to middle school, I'm going to add my own. And that pile gets adjusted, they're smaller. Then they go to high school, it's like, those pebbles look good, but I have my own pebbles. So the unified school districts kind of has agreements about what are the pebbles that we all support. So you don't have grade spans or grade levels in schools not appreciating the same pebbles, right? Because you can imagine it's a K through 12 continuum. And in the middle is a real big challenge, like, what is their evidence? How do we know we're having an impact? How do we know we're making a difference? This, I think, is going to be one of the biggest conversations in school districts. And the intention is to support your school leadership teams, your principals, your teachers, your instructional coaches to help shape these conversations. Bring that conversation up into your cabinet and your superintendent and say, here's what we think is important. Do you agree with us? Can you help us? And then have your cabinet bring it to your board and say, this is what your schools have identified as most essential. If we all agree, how do we support that? How do we allocate resources? So when you think about LCAP, been having to do LCAP work since the start of 2013. If you're in San Bernardino City Schools, 2014, it was a 413-page document, right? So it wasn't a change strategy. What I'm describing is more of what is your strategy for improvement, right? So I don't know if you have any personal thoughts about, how might we, engage with our schools in identifying the blocks that are essential? How do we listen for feedback? Do we have agreements on the Pebbles? And I want to go back to the past. What if the Pebbles of the past aren't going to work? What if people just keep putting their same Pebbles up on that? And they're like, I don't know why this rock isn't moving. Well, could be a reason why it's not moving, right? And then the measurement, it's strange, but sometimes people fear assessment. And sometimes they fear like evidence as if it's bad. But we do have to have some way to know if we're having an impact. So what information are we using to know if it's working? And how does that go from the classroom to the principal, to cabinet, to school board? What information is flowing up and down so we know if we're making an impact? So I just want to stop on this slide just because I think it sets the stage for the rest. And just so you know, this has been and will be an ongoing conversation at every level. And I don't want to imply that I have an answer. That's the lecture rock, the way it goes.
Yeah, because I've been doing a lot of data recently. One, sometimes backwards mapping almost from the high school level down to kindergarten, and those conversations, some vertical articulation conversations, so that you know what the common threads should be carrying through K through 12. Because when we get to high school, suddenly your DSEX matter, your what you do and your attitude towards taking classes that will senior year make a decision for post-secondary. It's those conversations, those focuses, and that includes the curriculum discussions. They have to be a continuous, everybody is rowing in the boat the same way. Your part in it is a kindergarten teacher, their part in it, I think is super, I love kindergarten. But the fact is that if they understand the end result of where we're going, and we get, okay, if I do this one thing it will be the same pebble, but I'm just going to carry the pebble in a different manner in kindergarten rather than in 11th grade. And so I think that it's really important to identify the threads, and sometimes going backwards to go forwards helps everybody get on the same page as to those pebbles that everybody needs to carry through, but maybe in a different way.
So Cindy, if I can just add, and I know that each of you probably want to speak, is I've often used the phrase every grade level is 1/13th of the child. In TK through 12, that's 13th grade span. So I'm 1/13th. And then what's nice about our current standards and assessments is they're designed to do, as you described, Cindy, right? They're layered and vertical. But yet what you said may be the largest challenge in the school district, right? Vertical articulation, and that conversation. So I couldn't agree with you more. That might be the most difficult change effort that anyone It's hard.
I would argue though that, I would say within the district, and I think it might be a statewide issue, is we're trying to do too much. And so, I think you alluded to it earlier, if we can be more focused on what it is that we're trying to accomplish and have mastery requirements or goals that are a lot fewer. I mean, I think that when you take a look at textbooks, you take a look at our framework and standards, we've got so much that are packed in there, and there's a lot of repetition from one year to the next. However, I think we have in general a habit of coverage as opposed to mastery. And so if we could try to take off a bunch of pebbles and really focus on these are the things that are critical that need to happen and track them, whether it's academically or socio-emotionally or
College and career.
but really, adding to what Cindy had said in terms of doing that pathway mapping, but have some critical milestones, critical paths that if we identify students that are not, that don't have those foundational pieces, having the system be able to fill those pieces in, but I think we're trying to do too much.
I can't help but agree with them. I mean, I think our rock is that we have so many rocks. There's so many things that need to be done. There's so many things that need attention, and that's what's, you can add as many pebbles as you want. The problem, the rocks are still piling up. So it's, I think you're right. It is a matter of how can we, and I think that's what you're alluding to, is that we should be, how can we scale down and be as focused as we can to make some things move.
That's what I mean by carrying the same pebbles. That the kindergarten is really carrying the same pebble as a high school teacher, but just in a different manner. That pebble is going to look, this is how I carry the pebble versus in kindergarten versus later. It's not adding pebbles. It's having that conversation of making sure that, like Dan said, we're not all putting in all these pebbles and the weight becomes way more than it needs to be and overwhelming, because then you just go, you pick pebbles and you go, oh, screw this, I can't do this.
So I've got a little analogy as being not pebble polished for years.
Exactly.
It's a gem at the end of the spare 10 years.
Exactly. That is brilliant analogy.
So I think then as you have this conversation, this then probably has to start at the school level, which is the intention with the principal, with the coach, and with the teachers especially. And I know that your elementary schools tend to work well together. So the intention is to have 3 elementary schools have that exact conversation, like what are those pebbles, what's the rock, how do we move together, how do we work together? We have different kids, different staff, different students, but yet we should be working on the same work. And then you have one middle school, and I used to be a middle school principal, and so there's a book that was written years ago from the state called Cotton Middle. So I'm kind of in between middle, elementary, and high school. So then, how do I carry that? What has to be my focus? And then when we get to high school, my kids are in college now, but I have to tell you that when they were in middle school, they were doing well academically, grade-wise, and then 9th grade hits, and the rigor and the complexity and the expectations and lack of direct support in the traditional high school system. My wife's a teacher, and I'm a teacher administrator. We were a little taken back as to what it really takes for a parent to get a student through high school, right? It's a lot of work on everyone's part. It takes a village. So how do we also think about what that child is going to need support-wise to make it through elementary and middle high school? So carry the pebble that have the supports. So maybe even the student can be carrying the pebble, but maybe they need different things so they can be carrying the weight and taking ownership of some of those skills.
And one of the things on Zandex at the county, part of the platform is building resiliency in students. And I think that's part of it. They're going to carry their own pebble towards the end, and they have that ability to get that. They have the capacity, but whether they want to do it or not is a whole different thing. But it's just the fact that throughout the course, starting with TK, how do we build that resiliency so that they can carry some of that, those pebbles in the end?
Yeah, I think the reminder is we only have so much we can do as a board. Our responsibility is to set policy, to give guidance, and to really support the creativity, the innovation, the leadership of our superintendent. But I think that we do that through things like, I just remind us all of the portrait of a graduate. The portrait of a graduate is to make sure that our students are ready for college, for career, for life. And the portrait of a graduate has just significant pieces to that. The rocks, if you will, the pebbles along the way, actually, the social skills, the traits of a learner, the real, I can't even say it this morning. Somebody say real world, okay, say that fast. And give them the academic literacy. We have an academic responsibility, but we also have a social responsibility, and help then students to be able to contribute to society. I think the portrait of the graduate says the pebbles right there for us.
I am so happy you said that, because as you probably already know, that's my next slide. And so,
Bill cheated.
so it is a well-done document. I mean, kudos to those that were involved in the creation of it, because what I like is it's not about the micro level standard. It's about because I can fit all the different state standards inside of this, but then I can have a conversation about what do I want to see my kids do. I may be a kindergarten teacher and I'm teaching these standards, but what do I want to see my kids capable of doing? So the real world skills. I think that this will be foundational and essential for this conversation. It's been happening and probably needs to happen more. What do we want to see? What's our 113? What are some of the pebbles that are priorities? And they might change, right? I mean, we have to be adaptive and make sure that just because we said one of these areas is our focus, well, someone said that if I keep working on the thing I'm good at, I don't get any better, right? So then what's something that maybe we need to sustain and something else we have to pick up and start polishing more, right? This is shiny, but this isn't shiny yet. So keep the shine, but bring something else. I think there was a sense of it could be overwhelming to consider doing all 6 of those themes at once, but are there some that need to become a priority initially? And how do we over time help that student? But what's interesting about this is, and this is the work at hand, and I appreciate your school district and working with your cabinet, with Heather and Ed Services, your coaches, also with the principals, and having a chance to meet with your teachers, is I've often used this diagram as if that portrait exists at the district level, what if it's not understood at the bottom by the students? Then the portrait doesn't have any sense. It doesn't have any meaning, right? Especially if the parent is next to the student. But then in between that red is like your focus, your priorities. What if there's some framing? What if there's not enough collaboration or interaction or support between some of these important groups? So I think the charge of this work, and with all of the members that are in this room, the cabinet and the principals, are we want to strengthen our system. So as we make these priorities, we can communicate down some expectations and allow people to make decisions. But more importantly, we want a feedback loop to go back up. So I think as a board, you want to have insights as to what students are doing and learning and the challenges. So it's got to be a two-way communication model. It's got to be a recurring feedback loop. And we have to make sure we're not playing the game telephone, but we're having a really strategic way to communicate and provide feedback. And notice in the middle of that, there's the leadership team. In talking with your principals and your cabinets, I know that one of their priorities is if our instructional coaches were essentially a member of the leadership team, and our principals are on the leadership and our teachers, how do we support that leadership team to lead up so they can work with the principals and help the district and board understand their needs, and how do we help them meet that? So when we think about a shared leadership system, we're all important in that, but that middle group is really essential to make the system function. And so that's probably bigger picture is we may find that there are some teacher teams in some schools that what we just spoke about makes them very anxious and nervous. And we may find there's other teachers that said, I've been waiting 10 years for this conversation. Thank you so much. And so there should be maybe some variation now in that teacher team. And then the leadership team has to be able to handle and guide and help them navigate that. And so that's, bigger picture, but if I were to change it and I want to pause here at the moment, this is what we want to create. I did a board workshop in Santa Monica, Malibu, which was interesting because their number one priority is student equity. And if you're in Santa Monica, you have a lot of poverty, and you have people that have high needs. If you're in Malibu, it's a very different environment. So your superintendent board is Santa Monica, Malibu. You've got two worlds, right? But both worlds were open to the idea of equity. But then when I shared this slide with the board, the conversation came, how is it maybe as a cabinet board, we move away from this hierarchy and we move towards what might be more of a hub, right? So how do we all work together on this portrait? How do we make sure that people are working in a connected manner? And then for the board, it's almost like, how do we make sure that this thing is functional working? And how do we identify the needs and gaps and provide the policy and supports to make it functional? And it is an improvement process. It can go to the left, it can go to the right, it isn't necessarily linear in nature. So if I have like a personal outcome, it's always start here, but end there. So what is your feeling about if schools choose the right focus areas based on the portrait and they use the scalpel to identify it? And the principals and their leadership teams and coaches and teachers in their schools and with cabinet and your support all kind of rally around those same outcomes for kids and figure out how to support each other and support those outcomes. I think you can be successful in innovation, and if you want to transformation. So and I bring this up because very few school districts operate like this. Most of them operate like this, and forever teachers are waiting for someone to tell them to do. It's a hierarchy. It's a wait and see. I'm not going to do until I'm told. It's even if I'm told I'm not going to do. But that's a whole different cultural element. What I don't know is where's room in the world now, and how far away is it from here to here for the world? Okay. And I don't know, but that's kind of the long-term sustainability conversation. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments as members of the board about picking the focus and having a more of a huddle around all on the same work, same couples versus a hierarchy, which sometimes is a little more compliance oriented. I know you have thoughts about this.
The good thing is that we do, to be honest, until recently, there's been a lot of change in our district office until Michelle, who's never going to retire ever from our district, but ever. And but that the feeling and actually what has been expressed to me is just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Because I'm not going to put any more effort into affect change when I know that a different program's going to come into play. I'm going to have to change from, data direct to illuminate, and then I'm going to have to do everything all over again. So I just want to know what to do, and then I'll do it. But I'm not going to waste my time anymore on this team or this team to try to affect this change because it goes by the wayside. So I think part of it is in moving towards the huddle is making sure that we commit, and that we definitely build a culture with our teachers and staff. We are committed, and we do want you to be part of this change, and we will and there's gonna be a trust factor that you're not gonna change it again, or somebody's gonna leave us, because Michelle's never gonna be right. And so then you just have to be able to build that trust, which is a process. But overcoming that big barrier to go from the previous slide to the huddle is really going to, and there are changes that have been happening towards that change of mindset. So, you know, it's just a process.
Thank you, Cindy. I think that you used key words for collaboration is trust and building that trust. And it hasn't just been the change that's been taking place in the district office. If you want to look at schools and the principles, that there's almost the seeming thing that the principles is going to change every 2 or 3 years. So in fact, teachers probably have more of a mindset, just stay out of my way so I can teach in class, so I can work with the students. And that may actually hinder some of the collaboration that we need. But trust is the key to that.
That's a great point, Bill. And I think to kind of help try and move into that, how do we build that trust? It's looking at that portrait of graduate as our example that we're talking about. And everyone from every level, you know, is practicing and living out the portrait of a graduate. We as a board are practicing our social skills and contributing to society and displaying the traits of a learner. Then if we're all aspiring to the same goal, it helps it feel more collaborative and make it feel we're living this out too. It's not just our students we expect this from, we expect it from everyone.
I would like to add that trust is the destination that we get to and are suddenly done with it. It's this ever evolving thing. And I do think that there's been great progress made, obviously, within the district office and at individual school sites. However, you know, personnel will continue to change and evolve. That will always happen, and our leadership will always change and evolve. We hope that we can have consistency for a period of time where our vision is established, communicated, started, and hopefully that person gets to train the next person coming on to continue that and they have the same vision. But I want us to be realistic in our expectations, that we don't just get to trust and yay, or if we don't get to whatever we think trust looks like, that we failed somehow. We are always just evolving in that. And so I think trust has grown and increased, and we need to continue to put forth effort in that. I think in my opinion, we are working much closer to that than we ever had in the past. So, well, I believe.
I would also add, you know, trust aspect is huge, and same things of having there being trust within the district, we're in better shape than I ever remember. The problem that I think that in terms of trust that we are going to have to somehow address is there tends to be various waves of I don't know, popular concepts in education, and now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that. And so the sustainability of whatever change that we're looking to possibly introduce is going to be, okay, we'll do this for now because we know something else is coming. To what a lot of our more experienced teachers are just like, what? I'll do what I'm going to do in my classroom. It's not antagonistic. It's not a lack of trust. It's more, yeah, this is how it goes. So we'll just go through the motions and doing this thing until the next thing comes about, and I'm just going to do the job. So that aspect of trust is probably more lack of trust at the state level in terms of what kind of requirements are being put on, put on to educators. And that's a hurdle that I don't know how we can address that. And that's an attitude that I know is pervasive among the educators.
Well, you all bring up great points, and so some of you may recognize this name, Michael Fullen. So Michael and I have worked together and actually bought the book together. And he has a phrase that I love. It's called leading from the middle. And he says, the role of the middle is to exploit above and liberate below. So on a school district, I may have misguided policy changes at the state level, but I'm gonna be really strategic in how I decide to go about that and do it. So you can kind of exploit that for my own purposes. At the same time, I'm liberating below, so I'm really allowing those who can do the work of flourishing, take ownership and feel more empowerment. And I think the reason why this diagram is in place is, the leadership team in the middle, I would say regardless of state policy changes, if you are 100% confident in what you're doing and you're seeing impact, Tony Thurman is not going to say, you didn't follow our state policy, you have growth in student learning. I don't care about the growth, I want you to do my policy. He's not going to say that, right? He's going to say, I wonder if my policy is wrong because you didn't follow my policy and you got growth. Did we do something wrong? What did we do right? So it's almost like, how can we show our growth and progress is superior to sometimes state level policies and changes that may be good in nature. And so the idea of getting to the middle is important because I would say this. I'm not talking about the rim, I'm just talking generalities. Sometimes the district feels like they need to provide too much to their schools and principals. And so principals become more the followers and compliers versus the true leaders. So I can go down this continuum, and the same thing happens to teachers. Being a teacher, marketing teacher, sometimes our teachers don't feel like our students are capable, and they are. So we do too much for them. We're more tired in the day than they are. So how do we actually liberate our students to really take on more of the work because they're capable? We just have to figure out how to support them doing it. I mentioned that to you because if you get your portrait right, I certainly hope that as policy in the state level change, that you will continue to see the value, especially your student growth. But here's the only if. Everyone has an opinion. Very few want to use evidence to validate an opinion. So I think everything you said to me feels so good. However, are we using evidence to verify and validate that what we feel is good is actually making an impact? And if you do that, you'll be successful regardless of some of those state policy changes. My wife, just on a personal note, has been teaching for 29 years. I've been married 25. I've only seen her get angry at the state twice. First was when we put in place student method. And we had to clean out our garage because she had all these bins of all the curriculum that she created about insects and dinosaurs. And she loved the art of teaching, and she had them all designed for the refrigerated classroom. And then she had to teach it. She was angry for about a year or two, and then she became not school. And then we changed our standards to more of a common core approach to say, if you're teaching, I don't feel like you know how to teach you. But if you ask her today, she's getting phenomenal. So she's the type that if you give her a year or two, she'll adapt and adjust. And some of her colleagues are still taking the bins out of their garage that she threw away 20 years ago. And so the reason I mention that is those who are doing something that was being done 20 years ago have no evidence to show that it works. And so some of these state policies were made to kind of overcome this transition. But here's 3 answers. I want to do all 3, and I'll get close for a 10:30 mark. Is if I were to have one wish for the rim of the world, for every school district in California and the nation, it's to everyone have the collaborative inquiry mindset. So I think it answered your first question about radical versus incremental versus slow change. If everyone embraced the idea of doing this cycle, this is what we've been working on together this past year, is what's the problem with practice that students learn? We agree on it, but we hear about it, and we understand what to do about it. That's step 1. What could we do that's high yield, that's high impact, and how do we measure, if we do it, it's going to work? That's step 2. Let's go and implement. Try it, adjust, adapt, refine it, see if it can work. And let's come back and say, here's what really works, here's why it works, and here's the ability to make those scale. For me, this feels like riding a bike. For some, this is like boring, right? So when we think about the change process, I choose social emotional learning. Well, what are the strategies I'm implementing for social emotional learning? How do I measure the impact of social emotional learning? How do I implement it, monitor its impact? How do we figure out how to do it well and how do we do it similar way? Having worked with educators for years, I think we're accustomed to doing phase stage 1 and 2 really well. Here's the problem. I can name it. I can describe it. I can tell you the problem. Here's what I think we should do. And what we forget to do is implement and define. And teachers get angry because we change every 2 years. The only reason districts change programs, policies, and practice every 2 years is because they spend years analyzing the problem and talking about what to do. They then execute, implement, and refine, and come to agreements. So the vicious cycle. So this to me is imperative to build this powerful mindset. And it could exist at the board and camp level. One of my colleagues works in the school district, superintendent with 94 schools. This cabinet is a 9-member cabinet. Every Monday, their cabinet has this conversation. You know, what's the problem that's existing in the school districts? What are some ways we might want to approach it? How might we do that? And how do we learn it? So that's the conversation we say in the cabinet in the world. It's happening at every level. So imagine that everyone, and this is the work now I'm talking forward, right? Everyone is engaged in the process. It's a mindset in the process. And I am so excited. In fact, I use this slide everywhere. And I want you to notice that I'm sure you recognize it because I haven't yet seen someone in the school district put together such an exceptional instructional framework. Because if you understand the inquiry process as your team does, that goes in the middle, right? And now it's how might we assess student learning? Is there a way that we should approach this myriad of too many standards, right? Which ones are priorities? Are there some strategies that will work better? And what are the social emotional needs? So it's almost like all these pieces that we talked about, if we can engage in very well, we can make strategic decisions and do it together and do it well. And it doesn't have to be that way forever. It's more of a process of improvements. So I really appreciate Heather and the team, principals working together to create that. And what we said, and Heather and I talked about is all we have to do is turn this over. Schools and teachers to have precision now, right? As a district, let's not get too prescriptive, but let's allow schools and teachers to say, here's how I want to assess learning and what's going to really work. But here's how social emotional learning should work best in my school. So give them some autonomy with the framework, but then say as a board, what's the evidence? Like, show me this working, help me understand it. And I'm going to stop with these two because the secret sauce is this slide and this slide. If you can now have an inquiry cycle that allows people to engage in constructive conversations, they can be forever successful. And it doesn't matter what the state policies are. So that's the intention for the work for this school year, is to build that strength of inquiry, to build that ability to have these instructional conversations within every principal, within every school leadership team, so they're making strategic decisions based on the graduate culture of the graduate. So I know some of you are educators, and those that are not will understand the systemness of this. Any thought or comments about how maybe this begins to answer some of the questions that you maybe laid out? How do we engage in strategic change? How do we provide guidance and prescription? How do we empower people and not make them angry about the change process, but engage in those? And we on the right track. And you feel comfortable with the track. If you want to respond, you can stop.
I love the secret sauce that you mentioned, you know, in terms of analyze, design, implement, and refine. Because I look at that and I see it, and I think, you know, in terms of what they're used to help build that coherent instructional framework, and I think the first or second slide of everything that he does is plan, do, study, act.
So it's in this, I don't mean to interrupt you, Gordon. This is anonymous, so I just want to say that the inquiry cycle, it doesn't matter the word you use.
I love it, I appreciate it.
I was gonna say that you were correct, I think that we do a lot of the correct steps in analyzing data, looking at our practices, and then we go, okay. And then the next step doesn't really follow through to the next part of, well, let's look at this. Did it work? It didn't, okay, so let's, you have another idea, let's continue that. Did we see a different outcome? Okay, let's keep going and going. So there is a behavior, so to speak, at times. And I'm not talking about as horrible, there is that glitch.
So what came to mind in terms of are we on the right track, it's thinking right from micro level here, it's happened this past school year, is the high school math department was studying which textbooks, you know, they're being able to have these textbooks for integrated. And one of the things that I really think that we're on the right track based on what happened there is they evaluated several different programs and they weren't happy with any of them. So rather than, I think historically, we want A, B, or C. Let's all look at them, and then let's vote, choose one. And instead, this is what we want, this is where we want to go. And none of these seem to have the tools that we need to get there. And so to answer your question, I do think, based on that as an example, and also thinking about backward mapping, we have a phenomenal opportunity here, especially with what has happened just in recent months in terms of being really goal-oriented and seeking tools to be able to provide solutions and resources for those goals. So, yeah, I'm very excited, and I do think there's opportunity, and I do think we're going in the right direction.
And they're also taking the lessons learned in distance learning and applying and looking at their decision making through that lens. So to take an example that Jordana gave, one of the math teachers in the math teacher in math department at high school is we need to make sure that we have online components that we're happy with the online components and that the kids have access, that's a big one, to those components. Because if something happens in the future, we are ready. And so I think that they are thinking and putting those layers into their decision making and really looking to the lens of, does this satisfy what we just went through? And because we never want to do this again. And so I think that was a silver lining, I guess, out of this year, is because they're that pattern of like, oh, I have 3 choices and I'm going to get this one. That now is not good.
Well, I appreciate all that. I think that maybe I would say that what you described with the math probably is like an informal way of making these decisions. How do we like formalize it so people say this is the way we do things? You know, sometimes when we say like, what's the reputable way? You know, that brings to like different types of thinking, right? But when we say reputable way, some things that we talk about today, that's what's in the back of the mind. We have an inquiry approach to make decisions. You know, there are certain things we all agree to, and it's kind of like what we eat, breathe, and live, right? It's us. It's that cultural change element. So, although I mentioned the secret sauce, this next to last slide is the key to success. So, and I want to maybe share it from maybe a vantage from the board member perspective. And I just want to tell a story of imagine this story, right? Imagine if all of your schools, so you have 3 elementary, 1 middle, 1 high school, 1 alternative. Imagine if all those schools, in a way in which the principal with support from the district, with both being there and teachers, created a plan of action that's based upon everything we spoke about. The focus is the rock. They say, here's what we really need to improve in our school that's making new district priorities. And they said there's some outcomes. We want to see that improvement. There's a certain amount of growth we want. And it was connected to the district, but also was driven by the needs of students in their school. And then they had really tough conversations. And we know some left-hand side of this, it goes back to reports of the graduate, and even more linear, like what are these students' success indicators? What are the skills and behaviors we want to see our students doing? If I'm in elementary school, then maybe I'm noticing K through 3, some of the foundational literacy skills, and some of the slope a little bit. It could be that math wasn't practiced well, so most of the students are struggling. Maybe writing was not something that was done much over the past years. Students lost in the skill of writing. It could be definitely social emotional in nature, but what do we really want to see our students be able to do better? And then the staff practices are those strategies and supports. What do we want to be doing in a way that supports our kid? What are the strategies? And then supports are how are we going to support each other and how we want support to look like. What's the role of coach? What's the role of principal? How do we work together as teachers? And that's that support model. And the evidence is what evidence looks like. How are we going to measure? Now here's the key. I don't know if I'd like to state dashboard, although I know what it is. I understand how it works. What I love is when a teacher says, I believe the student work is more important than the state dashboard. And I also know that the work that these students produce will give you more insights. It's high quality, it's rigorous. If they do this well, it becomes the pebble that you all mentioned. Because there's a saying that says past relates to performance. I can look at the student work being produced in your schools and have a 90% correlation to your next school your principals. All I have to do is look at the work the students produce. There's a correlation between task and classroom and assessment. So I don't care about assessment. I care what's happening with the student gets. What are students doing? So the evidence is, what evidence do we want to look at? This work, what will give us insights? Doesn't have to be state level data, it can be local data. And the time frame is that inquiry cycle. Should we come together every 6 weeks to talk about progress? Should we maybe give the board an update at 9 or 12 week mark so they can know the progress of every school? So maybe the principal and the teacher come on the board and say, here's what we've done, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's how we're going to adjust. Is there a way to give feedback up the system directly from the schools? So before the pandemic, we actually were working with over 500 school sites across California, and they all had one of these. And every 6 to 9 weeks, they would have a conversation, what's working, what's not working, how we adjust. And many of them would use it as a vehicle to provide insights up to the school board so that you communicate their progress, their impact, their needs. And so the intent is, and it's a challenge because this page may seem simple, but I have to share with you. I work with school districts in which the superintendent called me into his office. He said, something's wrong. What's wrong? All the schools wrote these plans, but none of them are spectacular. And I said, well, I don't think they like try and fail. I think that's what they would do. So now our job is to support the schools so they can be more precise, they can be more exact, they can be more clear. So sometimes these plans are a window into what is the capability or clarity of the school. And it's not an evaluation tool, it's more of a how do I now support you tool. And I can still remember being in Malmo and like school districts, and they have 30 schools, and Heather's position is there. And when we started doing this work in Holmdale, a very impoverished community, she stood up in the room, she says, I finally have something I can use to have a conversation with my business when school starts. Because if they offer the action plan, I can go talk to teachers and principals and say, how are the supports working in your school? Or are you noticing that the strategies you can show are having impacts? Or, let's talk about that evidence. You understand the evidence we're talking. So this was a conversation that includes. And so this is somewhat of the end goal. As William or Bill, as Bill stated, maybe the board's goal is to set goals as a policy level. But how can the policies you set make it so that schools can do this successfully, share within cabinets, and maybe every 9 to 12 weeks, share with you as a board, here's what we're doing, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's what we need. Trust us because we're seeing improvement, but know it's going to take some time. So how do we help shape that as a system so that becomes the process? Thoughts or comments? Because I tried to make that last slide seem exceptionally simple. But you can just imagine as individuals trying to get what you're going to do on one page. It's like Occam's razor, right? Like I could write 30 pages or write 3 pages. So how do I get what I want to write 30 down to 3? That's the conversation. Clear, precise, exact action. So we would like to see it to your schools and your ed services, superintendent, principals are committed to doing this type of work, and I think they're very excited about it. Won't be easy, but it's the change process.
I think that we usually get something like this once a year. And so it's harder to pivot if the school, it becomes obvious in conversation with the school that we need to pivot a little bit quicker on something. And by having that conversation with the board, maybe it's some action we have to take, maybe it's just a conversation. But I think by having the 9 to 12-week conversation will help us at this level pivot to make sure that we're giving the proper direction we need it or approval of something or whatever it is that's needed at the board level that is an easier pivot instead of just once a year. I think through board meetings, we're getting various reporting where we can deep dive once a year on various areas. But we're also getting the updates. We're getting a lot of information, which is fantastic. It seems like we are moving in a direction. And so we're trying to get this, Heather's been working her bottom off trying to be able, and the principal, and actually talk all the way through trying to be able to create the structured support this kind of technically management system. So it may be more a matter of not doing the annual deep dive, but maybe doing shorter check-ins based on interim assessments and the like, or through quarterly updates that are just more matter here. This is where we're at, we're on target, or this is where we're at. We might need to throw some resources here or there, or tweak this or that. So maybe the deep dives are wonderful, but there's a lot of effort and a lot of information once a year, and it may be more a matter of tweaking that reporting mechanism. So we're getting less tweak, but more of a just a management report, so to speak. I think actually, Jordana, what you're saying actually is if we're using that kind of restructuring, so to speak, and we're using this framework of what's working, what's not working, what do we need to adjust, we are kind of doing it for that. So, and if you know what I mean, it's continuous because those questions are always embedded within what the reporting is, so that's okay. We want something. Oh, okay, so what I'm saying is that if you are, instead of one big piece, and you are doing these quarterly, then you are in essence continuing the deep dive, because those questions will always permeate and always are embedded within the work of what's working, what's not working, what do we need to change. Because the deep dive that we have has those questions in it, and it's like, oh, it's one conversation, but if we continue to have the conversation, then it's constantly evolving, so it actually becomes more meaningful.
I would agree, but I'm concerned about the effort and time put into having together information for the board and the time seat that would be involved in trying to have that conversation on the deep level. That's, it's more a matter of, I trust the various leaders that we have within the district, and I want to be able to have their reporting out seamless, more a matter of what resources are needed, or these are some successes, and these are the areas.
I think that typically Heather and I frame those reports from our sites. And I think that we can work, it's already on my cabinet agenda for Monday, but to work on what are we looking at every 12 weeks and how do we make that? I know that the principals spend a lot of time on those annual reports, hours and hours. So how can we make this something that every 12 weeks is doable and maybe more friendly to their workloads? So we will work on that as a cabinet and as a admin team. We have management kickoff next week, so we'll be talking about that.
Yeah. Julianne, I think we're talking the same language, just differently, but yes.
5 minutes.
Sure.
I'm going to be timekeeper today.
Yeah, I just wonder. You want to go? Okay. If you want to clear back to the slide, talk about shared leadership and systemic collaboration, leadership teams in part of it. Our job is not to be the leadership team, but to establish the policies to be available for the leadership team. The fact is that right now there is a very good trust relationship between staff, the leadership team, and this board. And so you as the cabinet have the ability to present to us things that need policy changes that can help free you up to do the things or accomplishments. It's that whole collaborative communication. We're willing and open to receive those things from you, to receive the reports from you, Michelle, that would help us to see that, hear the answers to those questions. What's happening, what's not, what needs to be improved, and to hear from you. Okay, so this is a policy change that needs to occur. Something larger that needs to happen. We have that trust here, so we can do that.
I would say that maybe the difference would be an annual deep dive is like an autopsy, and a 9 to 12 week is like when the doctor for a diagnosis. And the unfortunateness is the large scale once a year. There's not much we can do about it. We can appreciate it, but we can't react to change. And I know at school level, that we'll be having these conversations all the time. And I might add that change usually is reinforced by celebration. So maybe these shorter conversations are more about what can we celebrate with our community and our schools and recognize success, maybe model it up and let others appreciate it and want to do it as well, right? So there can be opportunities for getting feedback, but they can also offer the opportunities for schools to showcase highlights and create, a sense of celebration. Because in every community, there's always a question amongst the constituents in this community about the schools. I don't think we do a good enough job of celebrating what we do and the community recognize our strengths and how we're really serving our students. So you can call it a public celebration. It doesn't have to be framed in a way that feels it's a lot of work. It can be an opportunity to showcase, celebrate.
Yeah.
With a spin.
Jason, before you end, can you just frame for the board what our work together looks like for the next year? Because we've got lots of meetings on our calendars.
Yeah.
And frame that out for
So
them.
here's what it looks like. So in this work, there's 4 parts. Just to be very, very quick and just say that we have an opportunity to work with the cabinets on some of these systems levels 4 times. So 4 times with cabinets on these conversations of systems and process. And then there'll also be 4 opportunities to meet with ed services and instructional coaches on more of that more explicit system of support. How do we make sure we're supporting our schools well? How do we leverage the expertise within ed services and coaches? So conversation with principals. And then we have the opportunity to be with your school leadership teams 4 times. And so they'll actually be doing the work that I presented and shared. I'm excited to see how they offer this plan. I'm excited to see how they decide to take on their instructional framework, create an inquiry process, what is their law. So 4 opportunities with their school leadership teams, 4 opportunities with ed services and coaches, 4 opportunities with the cabinets on the larger system. And then we do something called a principal collaborative. What that is a few hours a half day. And bringing together principals and talking about how do we navigate and move forward with cultural change and lead this work, because having been a principal, we can be a lonely job, right? So how do we come together and say some of the common problems we have are? How do we overcome these challenges? What's working for you? So those will happen 3 times. So our work usually is trying to engage the system and the way the system should function. So working with cabinets, ed services and coaches, school leadership team with principals, and then having an opportunity to be with principals to help them overcome that lonely job and with the leadership skills. I look forward to that throughout the year, and everything I shared with you, we've already been talking about. So it's painting a picture of visual picture as to what we might see the work looking like. So I want to personally thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. I greatly appreciate your conversation and questions. I find that you clearly understand the work that we have in the needs of parents. And so I just appreciate that opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, we have a 4-minute break to use the restroom, grab a goodie, and we'll be back. I'd like to remind you, we do have someone watching, and it's very muffled, so you can take off your mask when you speak.
Shot.
Live.
Okay. 3.2, setting direction, hopes for the future, board of trustees. So I'm gonna take a minute or two to talk and then we'll all try and take our turns. For starters, just want to let everybody know that the task that each of us board members were given was to read what the task was 4 years from now. Looking backward, what is it that you would like to be proud of that Redmond Unified School District has accomplished over the coming years? So it's a way of being able to try and say, in the future, if you look backwards, what would you like to say we have accomplished? Please understand, anybody who might be listening in, watching in, is that individually, each of us board members are powerless. We have our voice as much as anybody has their voice. So when we go through and say what our dreams might be, these are us as private citizens without any individual power to do anything about it. So if there are any kind of ideas that might seem a little bit just really forward thinking or scary, please don't, just take that as brainstorming and possibly dreaming. But at the same time, please don't think that that is going to be happening and set in stone. I hope that helps to clarify. So with that, each of us are going to be limited to no more than 5 minutes in describing what it is that we have in terms of what we would like to see happening. And then we'll open it up to a broader discussion and to stay within our time limit. Good? Okay, so Jordan, if you want to get us started.
Thank you, Anna. When I got this email that we would be doing this exercise for this agenda, I started thinking, and I kept thinking, and I started getting overwhelmed really with how many things that I'd like to tackle, how many things I'd like to accomplish. I looked back when I first ran for the school board at a list that I had created. There's a lot of things on that list, and it's only grown from there since. And, it had things, for example, like solar power, bringing solar to our school district. Financial stability is a large component of what I hope for the future of our district is some financial stability, some security in some sense. But the list has grown exponentially. It's like I said, I started getting overwhelmed with wanting to improve things like socio-emotional wellness, trying to build off of what we've already been doing with our virtual counseling, with our more frequent check-ins with students and parents and community members, and getting more involved in the community and doing more financial advocacy at the state level, hopefully doing some more advocacy at a federal level, and trying to find ways to help dashboards, outcomes to improve college and career readiness, to make more, better, stronger ties to our community, better engaged with great community, with great organization. Imagine if we all pulled together just a little bit more, and what it all came down to, and boiling it all to somewhat very esoteric goal. If I were, looking back 4 years from now, that's about the end of my term. So I'll have a decision. Will I be running, or, will there be, new blood? But looking back, I would like to feel comfortable. I would like to feel that we have a district that executes very well. And I think Jay touched on it a little bit. It's a lot of districts are great at analyzing and designing, but then they never implement. We've seen examples of that, with what was the famous case study, President Unified or something, that needed to cut their budget. They picked a lot of positions that needed to be cut and to reduce themselves, and they said, we're going to be fine. We're going to save ourselves from the state having to step in. And they created this great plan, they analyzed, and they said, it's going to be hurtful, but we're going to punish. They went through all of the community feedback, all of the angst, anger, and they never made the cuts. They never made the cuts, and the state came in and they said, my goodness, how did this happen? They analyzed, they designed, but they never executed. So looking back on 4 years, I really want to see the district execute well. From the bottom up, from the top down, from the middle out, because that is what brings me peace of mind. And there have been a lot of instances since we had this new board where I've seen our district executes very well. We work well with the unions, we work well with teachers, we work well with staff members, we work well with the community. And when something like that happens, it just feels really good. And again, I know it's a very intangible thing, but I think that's what brings very tangible results to a district as a whole, is being able to execute. The other thing that really drove that point home for me was seeing a lot of other public school districts going and interacting with other school board members and seeing them stuck in cycles where they have one or two board members, or they have a leadership team that just doesn't, they butt heads, they grind, and no progress happens. They cannot move forward if there's even one person trying to hold them back. It makes things so much more difficult for a district. It makes union relationships more tense. And so, again, just to wrap it all that's what I would love to see. It's a very difficult feeling to feel secure, to feel like, yes, we execute well, we can do something. Being able to do something. I think that's often the critique that I hear, especially amongst constituents in our community. Our community feels very strongly. I hear opinions all the time. I hear opinions about government agencies being slow, not being able to do anything. And I hear, of course, conflicting opinions, whatever the feeling might be. Us being able to execute, I think, would be a marvelous opinion. I think we're making great strides towards it. And I don't want to see that slip. We're in for hard times ahead, and that touches on to the financial goals that I've written out a whole, probably 2 pages of financial concerns and goals for our district. But none of it will happen if we can't execute. If we sit in perpetual stillness, we'll be in a bad place for years. So, again, I know it's very feelings centric, but it's important.
Thanks, Jordan. Natalie, you go next?
Sure. So Jordan, I agree 100% with what you said. My sentence that I'll start with and probably end with was having a unified vision with a clear focus on the success of every student. And I think that is board goal, district goal. It is to have this clear idea that we all want to go towards, that all stakeholders are involved in designing that idea, and that there's clear direction to get there. People are held accountable and responsible for getting to that place, and that at the core of it, it is to benefit each and every student. Obviously, we all know the way, things that we look at to measure those metrics, but I think keeping us on the same path is very important, and moving on that path, not being stagnant. But everyone needs to feel secure, needs to feel trust, to feel safety in their jobs. That's the student doing their job, the parent doing their job, the community doing their job, board administration, everyone's feels safe that they can think outside of the box, that they know what the expectations are, what their role is, and that each day the owner talks about improving 1%, and that if you improve 1% a day, that over time creates just this massive improvement for all of us. So each person can feel empowered that their role matters and they can work towards achieving and improving 1% a day. I think I will feel like we have had a successful 4 years. I may or may not be here for all of those 4 years, since my term's up before that, but my desire for the district doesn't change after that. I'm part of this community, I've been for a very long time. My children will be in this district at that time. And the work that we've done as a board to develop trust trusting relationships in ourselves and to challenge ourselves to continually improve, to become educated, to set that standard, I think is great. And it was what was necessary when I ran. I saw a very dysfunctional board, which then trickled down to everything else. Nothing could get done. Nothing was executed because there were so many blockers in the way, or personality conflicts or whatever it was, prevented each person from feeling like they had a place in the district. So again, a unified vision with clear direction, focused on the success of every student. That is where everyone is, and everybody's contributing to that forward momentum. I believe that we will have a very good 4 years. That's it. Cindy, you want to comment? Oh, no, okay.
Well, the beauty of a 4-year vision is it's what you're dreaming, what you're looking for in the future may or may not happen. But some of the things that stand out to me is one of the things that I would hope that we would have a positive view of the district in our community. That the people in our community are saying that is a great school system. In every school. And there's creative things happening in every school in our district. I'd like to, I don't mean to be jumping on what Jay said, but it was that part that I'm hoping for, and that's that the collaboration across our district will be looking at that in 4 years and saying, yes, we have worked together to accomplish new things. I'd like to see more classes that are occurring in the area of career development, as well as prep for college. One of my biggest things in 4 years is I hope that we are growing in attendance, not declining. That we actually have people saying, I want to get into that school district. And that includes that there'd be people from off the mountain say, I want to go work in that school district. That's a unique place that has positive things happening. I want to be there. I want to see us in 4 years to have met the financial cliff with integrity, with preparation, and be looking back and saying, we didn't just deal with the financial cliff, but we accomplished new things, not only in spite of it, but maybe because of the financial challenges that we were able to address. I'd like to see the wellness center be a specific thing, because the wellness center stands out for me. It's the area of social issues, social concerns, psychological needs, that we're looking at the wellness center and saying, that is being used every day by students. And frankly, as we look back, we know that some students' lives have been saved or changed because of their opportunity to participate in the wellness center. I'd like us to see that in the end of 4 years, we're meeting the needs of all students. We're talking about equity later today. And one of my hopes there is that in 4 years, we look back and say, equity did not divide us, it united us as a community. It gave us new insights in our desire to meet the needs of every student and to see that no one was being left out, that no culture, no background, no racial, no ethnic, no financials, I'm losing my words, but that no criteria hindered a student from excelling. And that we met those things in a united way, and that we're not as a community even looking at saying, oh my, it divided our community. Somebody was labeled as an oppressor, others were attacked because of this. Racism grew instead of decreasing. I want to see that we're united in the 4 years. So I'm looking for all of that is a positive view of this district that has increased in 4 years. That's enough.
Thanks, Bill. Cindy. Okay, so I don't want to be repetitive because I think my 3 previous colleagues were very well spoken. I'm just going to expand on what has been previously said. I want to say that in 4 years, I want to have excitement in this district. That people love to come here and work, as Bill said, that they want to enter their classroom because they're excited, that they've been given the supports they need to be the best instructional leader for our children that they can be, that our administrators feel supported, and that they can be creative with their staff to address their students on their campus. I want it to be where our cabinet is excited because there, as Natalie said, clear focus, there's a clear path. We're not wobbly and we're not deviating, we're not taking 3 steps forward and then changing our minds and going 10 steps backwards. That there's an excitement, that our campuses feel exciting, that everybody feels excited. Maybe we have 800 people at our football museum. I don't know, but I'm just saying that there's an excitement to be part of Remote World Unified School District, and that every child, I love this phrase that I just learned, so this is maybe my new phrase, that we give every child what they need when they need it. And that by the end of their time, senior year, that they have the resilience to move forward into their post-secondary life. And that we've given them the college prep and the career experience so that they're excited about leaving Rome High School and moving forward. Part of that, I know that I harp on this all the time, but part of it is that we gave them the tools to make those decisions senior year, and that we prepared them well to meet A through G completion rates, and we reduce those DFs, and they feel successful, and they feel like they're ready to be the best welder they can be, or EMT, or a PhD professor that maybe comes back and teaches at Rome High School, whatever. But there's an excitement that's generated by all the things my previous colleagues really said. And then the other thing I want to say is that, like Jordan has said, that we kind of started laying the foundation for, is that we're not afraid to speak up and fight for us. That we as RIM, we're gonna make it known when things done at the state or federal level don't work for our district. And we're going to speak up, and we're going to say why, and we're going to tell our story so that people know RIM of the World Unified School District, and that we are contacted for how is this going to affect your community? I want to hear from you, and that we're seen. I want to be seen, not me personally. I want RIM to be seen. So to speak up, to fight for our district, because when we do that, we're fighting for our kids, to make sure our kids get everything they need when they need it. So that's another little thing that I want to go. Yeah, we did that. I'm so proud about the fact we did for 328, which that late start bill currently is in limbo again. And it's like, that's because we had part of that conversation. So I just want us to keep doing it and be excited about what our work was. And I think that's a key word, excitement to be here. Thanks, Cindy. Jordan said, be fierce. And I'm like, yes. She says it right there. Awesome. Okay, I'll go ahead and say what I had. And of course, it's challenging to go last. And part of the reason why I thought this might be a good exercise is later on today we'll be selecting how we want to deploy our own resources and be involved in the community or other kinds of outreach that we've done in the past years. We aren't allowed to have these conversations as a whole outside of the public eye. So this is the first time that we're really having this discussion, and we won't be able to have further discussions unless we have an agenda. So things my colleagues did bring up all sorts of different, everything I definitely agree with. What I had down, because I did my work as well, is I guess a little bit more into the weeds as well.
is I want to be able to see 4 years from now, and again, my term's up in December of next year. Actually, no, a year from December. So this is envisioning that I was around for the next 4 years. I want to be able to say that we are a phenomenally strong school district with our math education. Across the board, definitely, I want to see us basically kicking back math. And that historically has not been something that I don't think we've ever been able to say, and I know that we're capable of. So I'm passionate about math and being able to say, you know what, it brings it when it comes to math education. That's something I feel very, very passionate about. As Bill mentioned as well, enrollment has been something that has been a struggle for us. It's very possible that our shrinking enrollment is completely out of our control, but I'd like to believe that there are steps that we might be able to take to be able to be more systematic about evaluating where we're how we're losing students to see if there is anything that we can do about it, such that 4 years from now we're looking at stabilized enrollment and possibly having gentle growth or controlled growth along with it. Definitely equity is a concern, and I think that there's a lot of strides that we can make within the district. One of the areas that I think that I would actually look at in terms of we don't have equity that's clear cut is looking at my kids both finishing or in college is in our district, we don't provide because of resources. We haven't been able to provide opportunities to our public school students here that public school students across the state are able to get, but they have not had coursework available to them. And so maybe in the coming years, what I would love to see is our being creative in terms of how we do course offerings, is being able to make sure that we are meeting the needs of every single student brought up before, but really being creative in terms of being able to make sure our students do have equity compared to public school students across the state in the courses that they have available to them, along with the learning environment that they have. We have old campuses. We've tried with the bond initiative to be able to try and address some of the issues that we have with our structures. Jim Zimmer and our districts is doing a wonderful job of trying to fix the problems that we have. But within a single school site, we might have one classroom which has temperature control and has a nice learning environment for students. And a couple doors down, there might be a classroom that just does not have the same kind of learning environment. So from an equity standpoint, not striving towards having every single classroom on our campus provide an optimal learning environment and teaching environment for our students. So those were, let's see here. Oh, and then also having some form of wellness center or something that would work at each of our different school sites. We do have the high school up and running now. This is one of the things that we have accomplished as a school district in recent years, but really looking at need in terms of socio-emotional learning, and the need is there, being able to the need is there for something, whether it's wellness centers or something else that might be more appropriate for those individual school sites, looking to meet those needs in each of those different sites. So that is my condensed list, because like Jordan, my mind was swirling in all sorts of different things, but if we try to do everything, in my mind, if I try to do everything, I can't get anything done. So we do have time for discussion. It's 11 o'clock, and maybe too much time, maybe not enough time. We have about 20 minutes. We haven't had a chance to really discuss. Each of us have presented. I'd like to open it up to a conversation at this point.
Well, one of the things I didn't say. So at Valley of Enchantment, and I believe at Lake Arrowhead Elementary, as well as RIM, we've had the opportunity of leadership training through clubs, particularly known as Early, which is it's a Rotary Club. It's a club for learning about leadership and service in the community. The kids at Valley of Enchantment Elementary School have been leaders of their own forces, their own clubs, president, secretary, treasurer, vice president, all of that. They've raised funds, something like $8,000 or $9,000 that they've raised. They've provided resources both in our community and around the world. And I'd like to see something like that. I'm a little bit partial to Rotary, but I'd like to see something like that at every one of our campuses where we're helping our kids to get leadership training, leadership experience, service experience, and actually involved in the community. I know our Interact Club at the high school has been involved in many things over the years, also raised significant funds to do things in the community and in other places. So that was one, and I meant to say this, I really like to see ROP increase. And probably I should say along with that habit, but I don't want to get in trouble here saying, but I write something. And I have to say this too, wouldn't it be great to have a couple more CIF championships in 4 years? Okay.
I really like and appreciate how, I think unified we were in our hopes and goals, because as everyone said, their hopes and goals are not even thinking, yes, it would be wonderful. I love that we all have equity, that we all want to pursue, in order to create perhaps some of that, what Bill's talking about with Rotary and maybe something else, in other communities, that happens through excitement that Cindy's talking. You can get the community excited. They'll want to participate and help our students craft and create their own futures. And I'm liking how in sync I feel like we all are at the moment.
No surprise when he comes up with the word excitement. On the blue, right? Jordan, I do think we all are very unified in our visions, and I think that we've been well informed of what the problems are in the district, and so we see things very similarly, and these are the necessary things that we have to address. But not that, and I think that creating that safety, having a unified vision, allowing people to do that, that is what creates fun and excitement. That's what feels good, and it means we want, like you said, we tie them all together. But an exciting district that people want to be at where things happen. We're all on the same page. It's a passion of ours to create a functioning district where students, teachers, all staff, all parents want to be, the community wants to be. Like you said, at the football games, preference basketball games, but they want to be here. Not
Soccer.
you don't want kids or teachers going, ugh, I have to go to RIM today. It's like, hey, I get to go to RIM today. And that feel and that vibe is not as measurable as some of the other outcomes. We can see, oh, the roof got repaired, oh, the school got painted, oh, we were doing some good things financially, we're getting rid of facilities we don't need, things are getting put in place to achieve that. But there's definitely a passion that needs to be sparked or need to be sparked, I believe. It's hard right now. It's hard after being gone because of COVID. It's hard with distance learning. It's hard with new regulations and mandates that not everybody likes or enjoys, that we have to follow. When you're restricted, it's hard to have this level of fun and excitement, but it is our desire to push in that direction.
Cindy, you mentioned the excitement. It reminds me of when I went to high school. I was a 3-year high school. And my first year in grade, deputy principal, Mr. Foster. And he was a very charismatic soul. And to El Camino, near the Conquistadors, he bought himself an El Camino car, had it painted with the school's colors and logo. And he would go around campus and he saw somebody just doing something good. He'd say, Camino to you. We just all thought it was really silly to begin with. But if he created this kind of exciting environment, he'd pick up trash as he'd go. And if he saw somebody else taking the trash, you'd get a Camino. It became kind of a way to go kind of a thing, but it definitely changed over time the excitement in terms of it was silly. He would lead cheers at the football games, but it became this charismatic approach really changed the morale. And I think again, definitely morale has improved in recent years, and I think there's a lot of more to go, but I really love the idea of just excitement, creating that kind of a an environment, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but I subscribe to that.
One thing, Mr. Gannon, that you brought up that I think that as a board, you all have some responsibility for, and that's to help in light of all the financial challenges, how do we help adjust our campuses? Some good things have happened because of COVID, but what else can we do? And so we're still going to have to lead the way with our community. So that's a part of the positive attitude. In order to say, okay, how are we going to do that? There's going to have to be some financial resources that need to be made available in order for us to improve our campuses. And then how do we make use of the spaces that we already have? Maybe there's still more creativity in what we do with our present buildings too.
I would like us all to ask ourselves a question of, do we do anything systematically that gets in the way of this being an exciting place to be?
Talking about finances is exciting, right?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm not getting in the way of that.
You are.
I think inevitably what happens is that some of the state and federal requirements, one being standardized testing, one is the continuous improvement of services for unduplicated account students. What does that mean? How does it look like? And in trying to meet all these different requirements, and then there's new requirements based on expanded learning opportunity grants and the different various new pots of money that come about in the California budget trailer bills, we end up, it feels like your creativity gets stuffed because the teacher in the classroom is like, I have to teach this standard. Well, it can still be fun and exciting. How can we support that teacher to be excited and not have them feel like I have to teach to the test. Heather has to, come in and be the bad guy. And she doesn't get to have fun and excitement because she's like, okay, you guys have to do these assessments because we have to put them on a piece of paper. And it just becomes that sometimes those things get in the way of our creativity because we feel overwhelmed by those requirements. We have to figure out a way to infuse the ability to be creative, to be supportive of each other. What do you need help with? And I loved how one time Heather and I were having a conversation and she was talking to her about something from high school. And her whole thing was, we want to help the district office. Heather wants to help the site, the teachers, the staff. Just tell us. Just tell me what you want to do. Let's see if it can happen. And I think that sometimes that we get so overwhelmed with taking attendance and discipline requirements that we forget to reach out for help or to go, I have this great idea. Oh yeah, I'm not going to get any money for it. I'm not going to get any help for it. I'm not going to get resources for it. Well, if you just speak up, that magic might happen. It may not be from Heather or Jenny, but maybe it's from Rotary. That magic can happen, but you gotta talk. You gotta have that ability to speak up.
Right, and I think that, when you become task oriented because you need to check all of the boxes, it does stifle your creativity. And so providing space and opportunities and encouragement in new creative ways for other people. Like we are the facilitators of that potentially, or the leaders within our district are the facilitators of that. It is not amongst them to come up with all of the creative ideas and to infuse this excitement and joy into a place, but it's creating the space that everyone has the ability to do that. Now, I haven't worked in this district in Georgia, so I'd be curious from your perspective what could lend to more opportunities for that while still meeting requirements. I mean,
Jay brought something up that I thought was really important. It addresses what Cindy was saying as well, is sometimes it might make sense for our school district to not follow lockstep with the state's guidelines are, if we're doing it in a thoughtful manner. And maybe the school sides and the teachers are saying, this isn't a good practice for us, and the students, it would be better serving the students if we do X, Y, and Z. And as a board, providing the support and the courage to be able to go our own path in a thoughtful manner. So I'm not answering both of the questions, or both. So that might be, because again, in the classroom, and we're also seeing it right now with all the different, the reports that Michelle's on to do for being able to get our COVID money, is oftentimes there are things that are in direct conflict with each other. So if we liberate the teachers in terms of focus on the students, we have our portrait of the graduate. We want to get our students from where they are now to there, and being able to do what's best for each of our individual students. You tell us what you need, rather than having it be that you have to cover this standard in this day and this standard in that day. Maybe taking a more cohesive approach. They have to sell us on that it's going to be worth taking a chance for, but possibly actually taking a step back from all of those different state-driven rules and really focus on what's best for our students.
And I think that for myself personally, I can only speak, that's a very challenging thing to look at. It is our job to protect the district too. We cannot run an Instagram. We have to follow these requirements if we want funding, if we want to continue to stay alive. And there is a balance point. There is space, I believe, in there to find our own way and to have that creativity while also protecting the livelihood of our district and everybody's jobs and all of our students' education. I mean, if that is our greatest responsibility, is to keep this place safe in that way.
Yeah, because the thing is that we don't want to have our paper money in the bag, because we are not showing an improvement of services for our individual account. We're not classifying our students in a manner that needs to happen, or that you're passionate in that, but we're really not seeing that progress that we want to see in math as it's given to us, whether you like it or not, in standardized or assessments or whatever. So having that, being able to create the space to be creative, but at the same time balancing what we have to do, that's the trick.
I would just say, if I can add, that our last presentation should give some excitement and hope to all the things that you're talking about, because we're going to focus on the teacher with those action plans and give them opportunities to see how to reach goals of achievement with action plans. And so that's why, to me, and I believe I speak for the cabinet, the work with Jay is so exciting, moving forward in a way that is defined instead of everybody doing their own thing. Having those conversations, and Todd and I visit schools every month, and having a way for us to look at those visits differently. And so I hope that you see that this morning, I'm glad we started out with Jay, leads to that kind of work that you're all talking about. And being a timekeeper, you have 5 minutes.
I was going to say that this morning, the work with Jay, I think was the best thing that us as a board could have done and has done. I just really feel that there's a path, there's a guidance, that we have something that can be successful, that we've already created stuff, like Bill has always referred back to the graduate as a basis, that we have this vision and goal for our kids. And so I think I really liked Jay's whole thing. It's like, okay, I'm a fan. Not as much as John Gray and Ron Bennett, but I'm a fan.
Dan, I was going to say in response to what Natalie's asking, there are things that are in the way systemically. we know that there's things that are put upon us that by the state. Being the husband and educator for 46 years, I've seen all kinds of things that she has been frustrated by as a teacher in the classroom because of what the state puts on. But I would really like us to be asking cabinet and the staff, what is your view of policies we might have as a board that hinder you from doing your job, that hinder you from doing creatively, that hinder you from being excited and optimistic about the future? Because I'm sure they have some views that would be helpful for us.
We have time for one more comment. No, actually, well, the one thing actually, I really like that Yanni had said in terms of 1% a day. That, just, I think people take that approach. Yeah, I agree with that. I love that in terms of it doesn't have to be huge leaps and bounds, but just that little incremental improvement can make a huge amount of difference. We'll wrap it up with that. Fantastic. Okay. Great discussion. I enjoyed that. 3.3 is strengths, leadership training, superintendent and board of trustees. So Michelle, and
Then we take our break and
sorry, I don't get a 5-minute break.
I'll pass out the handouts and I'm going to rest. Yep. Todd, all the audience members too. Okay.
So excited. No.
You know, we don't have to stop this.
What?
You want to reannounce the topic?
Yeah, I hear it.
Okay.
Are you ready? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. 3.3, strengths, leadership training, superintendent and board of trustees.
All right, so we started this training in the district several years ago. We've done it with our leadership team and our school board, but we've added a new school board member. So we wanted to do some refresh. So, and then talk about how do we use our strengths to move forward. So, and some good reminders. We're gonna do a couple activities today. We have a video, but first I'd like you to look at, you have a series of handouts, just so that you know, since Cabinet is in the room, and Connie, and I should have added Mark. Mark's on the district leadership one. You can see cabinet strengths and where we fall. And then the second page is the board. So I've taken off Dr. Branson and added Bill. So you can see, and then myself, because that is the governance team, where we all fall with our strengths. So seems like I'm a loner on a couple of these, but we're going to talk about them, but I wanted you to remind you of them. Is there anything that you would want to notice about the board strengths before we start, or maybe you'd like to say about them before we start?
One thing that I really appreciated was when we did this a couple of years ago was that when the board shared their strengths at that time and cabinet shared their strengths, what was really funny is that a lot of us board members are in the strategic thinking type of category overall, and almost everyone in cabinet was in an executing type of category. It just seemed to fit so well, just lending strength to the gallops, integrity of their task.
All right, so we're going to move forward. So what I did for some activities today, some I've taken out of my handbook for when I was a professor at Azusa Pacific University, because that university follows strengths finders for all their students and faculty. So, and I had the opportunity of, when I did that, to work with the author of the book, the original book, Strengths Quest, Don Clifton, and got my training through him. And he passed away, I believe, of cancer not long after he wrote the book. But so some of these activities we're going to do are just reminders. But I went onto YouTube and I looked at some of the videos. There are hundreds of videos on Clifton's Strengths Finders through Gallup. But I tried to find one with, because it's kind of our theme today about team and getting to know each other. But how do we take the strengths, now we know that what they are, what we have, and how do we work together better as a team? So this is a very short, I think, 2-minute and 30-second video. And so about improving team performance with our strengths. So we're gonna play the video. So, there were lots of videos on how to use it as a team, but I chose that as a focus today. Any reflections from what she said in the video from the board? Or even our cabinet is okay, chime in.
I really like the idea of us not only knowing ourselves in terms of our strengths, but there's a synergy being alluded to here in terms of us now being able to recognize what each of us are, and now how to be able to move forward with that, to be able to have us operate entirely as a stronger unit. So it's one thought.
All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna have lots of discussion. So we're gonna do an activity right now. So I need you to take out a piece of lined paper in your packet and something to write with. If you don't have something to write with, Connie has extra pens. We're gonna do an activity that I got from APU called the Writing Challenge. And so it is a timed activity so that you know. And we're gonna do something that will be fairly easy for you and then something that might not be fairly easy for you, and then we're going to talk about it. So then we'll do the reflection questions that are on the first page. So on your piece of paper, everyone has a writing instrument. Please number down the left side of the paper 1 through 5. Doesn't. I need to get my timer out here just a second. You are going to have 30 seconds to write your full name on each line as quickly as you can. Go. On your right hand side of your piece of paper, now number 1 through 5. Switch hands. Now we'll do that same activity. Write your full name on each line as quickly as you can using your other hand. Go.
Doesn't have to be legible. Cheating your damn dog. That's not.
5 seconds. Stop. There's supposed to be laughter. We're going to debrief that activity and discuss what did that feel like? What was that like to do that activity?
Even the first 5 was frustrating because I'm going through my mind the fact that I have the longest name compared to everyone else. And I'm gonna finish last, and this is embarrassing. So I was frustrated with that. And then it's unfair. And then on the other side, I mean, it's just funny, obviously, it's completely illegible. And I barely got through. I didn't get through 2.
It's funny, on number 4 on the first side, I switched and wrote down YOURFULL, and in case this was a trick test.
So interestingly enough, I thought we were stressed with the first one and the second one, because the first one I thought was achievable. And I didn't quite I got through. But with the second one, it was so beyond the possibility, to get to all 5, that kind of marked the miss because it was just way beyond what was possible.
I think the second one was more free. She didn't really give a crap because I knew it was like, oh, it's not gonna be legible, so who cares?
Any words from the audience that participated?
Yeah, we love you.
I just want to share with God, I'm highly competitive. So just to try to get through and make sure that we get out of this. I got a short name.
What's your middle name?
Once. A little extra.
I was not down too, I got a long name, and I didn't even my middle name, which is Suzanne, so Heather Suzanne, we just like that was your name. Partly through, I thought, what is it, full name, I don't know, last time I have to be right there.
I didn't know how to hold it.
I didn't either, and I thought maybe I should turn my paper, or I needed to, it's your friend.
I could do cursive with my right hand. Left hand, that's how I was signing it when I started trying to do cursive. I don't do cursive.
But I was definitely much more efficient with my strength. Okay.
Which leads into our next question. So when we try to do things that aren't a strength for us, how much time was lost on trying to do what does not come naturally? So when we change the context from just the writing activity itself to the work, whether that be on the board, your personal, or your, work in general, your life skills with family, how much time is lost on trying to do something that doesn't come natural? I'd like to kind of discuss that.
30 seconds, because that's all you can give me. But in life, it's interesting because I automatically go to like challenging that question in the sense that shouldn't we do things that challenge ourselves? And I want to, but I'm aware when you're part of a team, if other people are naturally inclined to do those things, we need to kind of like give up our pride a little bit, or I need to give up my pride a little bit and just say, I trust you. Why don't you work on the things that you're good at, and I'll work at mine, we'll be more efficient, we'll probably get greater results than me forcing my way through trying to figure out something I'm not naturally good at. But I think there's a delicate line there. I don't want to also, I'm an achiever and I'm a learner. So if I don't want to just give up the desire to learn and grow and say, handle it all, because you're good at it. For me, it's more like, hey, you're good at it, teach me how to do it your way.
I think there's something to be said, in terms of time lost doing what doesn't come natural to you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try. For mine, I already knew that writing with my right hand does not come natural to me. But you gave me 30 seconds, and I wanted to try to write something legible. So it gave me the opportunity, taking that time to try something doesn't come naturally, to say, you know what, I did my level best, and like Natalie's saying, maybe somebody else should do that. Maybe somebody else should be writing with their right hand instead of me.
So when I'm tasked with something that I'm not comfortable with, sometimes I'm like Heather, I overthink it, overanalyze it, and then I freeze. And then I get to the point where, screw it, doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just go for it and see what happens. And then it tends to be more fun. And then at the end, I go, wow, I learned a lot of stuff in that. And it might be that I need to hand that task to somebody else, but it might be that I learned a new skill. And it was because I stopped trying to be so perfect and doing it right and overthinking and overanalyzing, like, oh, let's just bring it.
Did you happen to notice a change in the noise level of the room during the activities?
Yeah.
We were much more talkative than when we were, don't you think, when we were doing the opposite end, because we were laughing.
Yeah, talkative, laughing, I was wondering, like, if that lends to growth too, and creativity, because we know how to do it with our dog hands. I'll say dog, Jordan's not, already. So I hope we took it seriously the second time. But with our dominant hands, we are focused, we're silent, we're just to ourselves. And when we are not good at things, that's when we should be reaching out and we should be, you know, either be making light about it or laughing about it or asking.
So the key concepts of this particular activity, it should begin to emphasize for you that, the idea that our strengths or talents are things that come naturally to us, that we can work on our weaknesses and try to make them better, but we will spend a lot of time trying to improve something that isn't a strength. And so maybe we need to think of our strengths differently and how much better to do what you're good at and to continue to develop and build upon those areas and manage your areas of weakness. So are you using your strengths to the best of your abilities?
Which was answer that,
You can.
on my job, my job that I get paid for, it's kind of a woo job, so it's awesome. I fit in really, really well in my job that I get a paycheck for. Just saying, it's pretty woo, pretty learning, lots of learning, kind of fun to figure out, you know, the new project and how to solve it, and you just have fun. Yay.
We're going to start the next activity then that is going to do some reflection, and then we're going to fill out a worksheet and do some more reflection. So thinking back, now that you're aware of your strengths, you've been aware of your strengths for what, a year now, maybe last summer. So thinking back on your using of your strengths, where do you most frequently use your most dominant strength? Your most dominant strength would be any of your top 5. If you have your sheet, it would be the first one that came up on the list. And if you don't have your sheet, it's pick one of your top 5 that you think is your most dominant strength. And where do you see yourself using that most frequently?
Mine's achiever. And I think I see it in all areas of my life, but definitely is off in the work environment. I think in regards to like getting tasks done, I do a lot of like making policies and procedures and implementing those types of things and leading them to my team. So I think that work is a place that really thrives, but I do think in regards to most areas of my life, that achiever piece, obviously I was a competitor and but her stays alive.
My top 2 go together, because my top one is relator, and my second one is woo. And I use them everywhere. In everything I do. So I come in here today and I'm thinking about bringing some chocolate cookies today, and I'm saying hello and trying to disconnect with everyone that's here. But that connection, I want it to be more than just, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, goodbye. So I want to connect more personally to really see what's happening in somebody else's life. So they both go together.
My top one is learner, and just like Bill, I use it everywhere. From work, I think is where it gets its most effective to be learning all the time, being on that cutting edge. But even in my personal life, I wanted to buy my wife some plants. But for me, it couldn't just be going online and finding some place to buy plants. It had to be, well, what kind of plants work best? What's native to the area? What will grow easiest? She's not a great, she's not a green thumb, but she wants to be. She wants to learn. So I should buy her some plants. My first step was learning all about plants as opposed to researching where I could buy it. So from work where actually, matters quite a lot to even the most menial things like just buying a gift for somebody requires a massive amount of learning from me.
Oh, go ahead, Georgiana.
So my top two, the top is strategic and the second was achiever. And I think that in some ways, I'm constantly trying to do both. Then last night playing games with the family, where I have the feeling that my kids and my husband did the same test, we probably are all very much aligned there, so competition can get a little bit fierce. With business, staying true to strategy, especially into the past year and a half successfully, my brain can't stop in terms of trying to think about and optimize. And it's through strategy that I achieve. So yeah, it's a constant part of, I think, of who I am.
For me, consistency is one of my strengths. That was difficult during the pandemic because the guidelines we were getting were not consistent. And so with working with cabinet and trying to create like communication plans and being consistent and board first, then union leaders, then teachers, then parents, and trying to create consistency in inconsistent situation was difficult. But I think that overall, that helped me to get communication out and to achieve some of the things that we needed to achieve during this time. But it does wreak havoc with me when things change on a weekly, hourly, monthly basis. Would cabinet like to take off your mask and share anything about using your strengths, your most dominant strength? Heather can't hear you.
My top two are developer and ranger, and every single day as I work with our chosen team, as I work with, I find that I'm able to use that strength. And I love to help people develop their potential, or to see them and the light bulb comes on, the louder. When the light bulb comes on and someone gets it, like, oh, that makes sense now, and being a part of that process. And so the work that I do every day is very much, and then I'm a learner and an inputter. So if you come into my office, I have little piles because everything is going to have a purpose, or this will work with that meeting, this is connected to that. And then, so I tend to archive lots of pieces of information, which is perfect for the work that I do. So I really see my strengths as being, I'm able to utilize them every single day. I just love that.
I love what Heather said too. Mine were achiever, arranger, visualization, and later. And so I think the achiever and the arranger are two of my strongest. And what's that called? Okay. And so I think just having to keep things so organized, especially right now. And I mean, I do have organized chaos in my office for those of you who have come by a bad month when I have lots going on. But I think probably one of my strengths is actually one that we talked about before, that I don't like about me. So I have this sometimes that I see that that's coming out, I have to put it in the context sometimes for bouncing things off of some of my closest, friends or colleagues at work, that I can say, hey, I know I'm going in this direction and really, so I do want to strengthen me. So that one down.
Let's see, next, my top two are related to strategic. Apparently they're strategic and two are related, so. But a lot of those here I think are right in, being related or someone who listens to others. We're taking the right ideas and concepts, technical and make something of their ideas. I was kind of right into strategic, which is something that really similar. It's taking these ideas, make it creative, to look out for myself, and further develop how, like Jordan said, is finding out why certain things happen, get into that concept, and be able to use that, to find different options. I think it, Father said it can give a lot of good resources, in negotiations, a lot of it really is, it's into a lot of ideas, trying to analyze what those ideas are, and have a strategy, work with others to find a solution.
And then when we talk to, and I remember this clearly because now when we comment, when we did this, oh, you're the perfect college student, because you're a learner and you're a woo. And so those were my top two, and I like to learn about things, and then I like to communicate and them out, and I want to have fun doing it. Are we having fun? If we're not having fun, why are we doing it? Let's not do it anymore. And so I think that I really like to learn about things. Sometimes I get too down the road radical, because Jen talked about strength, and that also can be a weakness. I can go down into the rabbit hole because it's so fascinating to me. And then, of course, I need to tell everybody, my husband gets glazed over when I'm talking to him because I talk too much.
One of the things we've done in our coaching team, we've all taken it, and it helps us understand each other. As sometimes one of our strengths is somebody else's, not their strength. And sometimes we can get annoyed with one another because our strength is not somebody else's, and we aren't seeing it from their perspective. So it's really been helpful for us to be able to talk about, or even if it's a task. You know, when you're the ranger, when you're the put things together person. So this task is really suited for your strength. So it's helped us as we delegated work. And I really like how the book talks about if you're dealing with someone who has a different strength with you, what are some things you can keep in mind as you're working with them on the team so that we build relationships and not get irritated by our differences. So it helps with building community.
So we can hear from Derek, Mark, and Connie.
We can.
We'd love to hear from them, especially as
They're
related.
shaking their heads. I have yours in my drive.
Mark definitely will.
What's that?
Definitely a rule.
No, I
No, it wasn't.
Very few moves.
It's a rare string. It's the rarest, I believe it's the rarest string. No. I think I'm wrong on that. I can look up what the rarest one is. I know David Nygren is a blue.
No.
That shouldn't surprise anyone. So besides being reminded of your strengths on an annual basis, when we first did this with our leaders, we had them print them out, put them up in their offices. I don't think that they're still there, but other than reminding you on an annual basis about your strengths, what, if you haven't, it's okay, but what ideas could we share about keeping, developing your strengths? What do you do to develop your strengths, or what could you rethink about on how to develop your strengths? Like a good example might be that a learner or might be someone who is, like making sure they're reading a book that stimulates them once a month, stimulates their mind. That might be a way to continue to develop that strength. Achiever is the same thing, or competitiveness. It's just like for me applying for awards or grants for the district, that's an achievement that we just applied for one. We haven't heard a thing, but we did apply for one from CSBA. So, it's just keeping that, in the forefront in context of when.
This is a more, personal thing first, is that, for my own self-care and honoring those strengths. Achiever and learner are my two highest. I recently started a to become a certified yoga instructor and a trauma-informed yoga therapist, which is specifically for therapists who do yoga. So that's been exciting for me in like my home life. I think I've gotten to the point where I went to school for a very long time. It took a long time to get all my degrees. And then, you kind of burn out from that. And then you just move into practicing and still learning in ways, always and growing. But I want to find creative ways to challenge myself. So that's one of them. When it comes to Ring in particular, continuing to be a leader and a learner and an achiever, I think that the learning piece, we've all shared this many times, and repeating us and the fact that we get information daily and we are constantly absorbing that and learning about that. I think I want to challenge myself to maybe come up with more questions, because we are so cohesive, we have a tendency to just take it in and go with it and not find creative questions to it to keep ourselves learning. So that's something that I would like to do when we're doing our board material.
Well, frankly, Michelle, I think that your strengths you almost naturally develop because they are a strength. So you naturally use them, you naturally continue to use them. I think the things that don't come out on my top 5, like for example, when I see competitor out there, like, oh man, I'm so competitive, but it doesn't come out as a strength. It's not one of those resources that you would for me or learner. 5, 6 degrees, I've lost track, and continue to take more courses. So I'm a lifelong learner, but that doesn't mean that it's one of my top strengths. Interesting is what I'd really like to do is go back to the Strengths Finder and learn the 5 lowest that I have. The Strength Finder does that, and just to get the insights of those things that are farthest from me. Because if you notice, one of my strengths is self-assurance. Well, with self-assurance, you do everything, right? And you're going to be confident you can handle it. No matter how much time it takes, you're gonna work at it. But I'm not sure that it's my top ones I have to actually do. I just need to let them be there.
See, Blue would be very far from my top strengths. But Heather and I just had this conversation that you can pay an additional fee to get up and get your bottom line.
Yeah.
Which would be interesting. That's something new since I took the training. That you can do, because her and I were talking about that yesterday. So, but.
You say one of my strengths, maybe my 4th one down is responsibility. And frankly, I think right now, life is pretty crazy. So in terms of being able to develop, I think that sense of responsibility has been kind of filling my time and trying to be able to take care of all the patients. And so I don't think I'm developing any of my strengths right now. It's more that at this point I need to deploy them to be able to try and continue to achieve. So it's just more a matter of getting water and staying afloat.
COVID was really hard for a while. It was communication. That was really hard during COVID. Just saying. I think that actually the interesting part is coming out of COVID for somebody that loves to communicate with people, learn about. I love being a waitress because I could talk to everybody and learn about them and just learn what they do and go, oh, you're an investor. Oh, I invest money without speaking out in those things. And, I did just buy some books, Investing for Dummies. And the best ways to invest, because I thought,
I should know more about this instead of reading it. And so I'm just saying that I think that in this time of COVID, one of the silver linings is being able to really develop another strength, which is the learning of saying, I want to learn more about this. I want to learn more about this. And now the will is escaping. And I'm just saying that I have to let it out. And so the interesting part is that I am excited about being with people and exchanging those ideas and learning more and being able to communicate with people that back and forth, face to face, not this screen kind of way. And I think that I'm more assertive in creating those situations, way more assertive in creating those situations. And one example is I'm just, my sisters and I got in the habit after my mom passed away of getting together. I remember our sister day, and then it's crazy. We just end up seeing each other on the holidays. Well, since my uncle passed away and was on my mother's house, I was determined to have those sister days once a month and break through my other sister's resistance. Oh, I have this. Oh, I have that. So the interesting part is that I'm learning my sister's rhythms, both my sister's rhythms, and being super assertive in creating the room, creating those opportunities to get together, to relearn about my sisters, to have that communication, and especially face to face, about that's not as superficial. That's really really getting down to relearning them and really how are my sister's job for a dance studio, my sister's job for advertising, and just getting into the dance firms, getting into the weeds of their lives and redoing that and becoming very assertive in doing that. So it's been kind of interesting coming out of COVID. My glue was suppressed and now it's coming out with a vengeance.
Okay, so what we're going to do next is the last page in your packet. It's called Exploring My Strengths. I want you to reflect on your 5 strengths. And these don't have to necessarily be work, but identify 3 leadership, board, job, or even personal tasks that you perform with ease. And identify the strengths that come into play when you do that task with ease. And then identify either 3 personal, leadership, board, or job tasks that you find difficult. And what strengths can you use to assist you with these challenges? So take about 5 minutes and fill that out.
Yeah. It's really not self-reflective. Self-reflection.
So I'm gonna stop you. We have about 10 minutes or so to keep, have a discussion about this. I do want you to know that in looking at our strengths and looking at management strengths, there's some new folks we've hired and that haven't taken strengths class. So we're kind of catching all 6 of those people up, like Lisa and our new EL host, Megan. So Bruce, they're all got the book this week. And so they'll be taking that and adding that to the leadership strengths. But I'll start, I guess. I think something that I think I do well is I'm really good to-do lister and calendar and checker offer and setting deadlines for myself. And I think that my strength of consistency and discipline help me with that. I guess a task that I struggle with, I'm gonna go to personal, is probably taking care of my own health. And just exercising, that seems to be, I'm pretty good at the food prepping part, but I'm horrible at getting any exercise in. And so strengths that I could probably use to assist me with that would be competitive or achiever. I just hired a virtual trainer, sort of, and she posted my picture on Facebook today and said, "A year from now, Michelle, I set a goal that I want to hike with my husband, because I can't do that right now. I can barely walk up a flight of stairs. So that is my goal." And she posted that on Facebook with my picture this morning. And if that isn't competitive achiever status right there, I don't know what is. So she said, "Welcome to the team," and here we go. So there we go. There's a little bit of insight from me. Would anyone else like to share?
Okay, I actually had the same thing working out in self-care. And so my positivity, I'm gonna try that, but also one of the other tasks that I struggle with is delegating. I have to do it all on my own, to do it all by myself. So recognizing that I am as well, hiring somebody to get my butt in shape, get healthy, and stop overthinking it. So just like you, I had been going using my, I don't know, maybe if I'm with somebody and it's really fun, my mood will take over. So, but delegating, I think communication will help with that. And then tasks I do with these, I love organizing. I love crisis management. Those things, my mood, my communication, my positivity come into play. I love being on set when things are coming up hot, so to speak, and just being able to figure it out, solve a problem, and move on and see the satisfaction that it's all figured out. And for whatever reason, even though I'm a drama major, I love accounting and data. that's the learner part in me. I love to get in there because I learn things from it. So I'm really good at it, which is really surprising when that came out. Shocked the heck out of me.
It's a good people person will be able to share. I want to give everyone an opportunity to talk. You took your mask down.
You can also jump in, I guess I'll start with something deep, or something children. I think one of the things that are keys is each one every week. I think that's really great working with strategic side of things. We had a couple of weeks. Mine doesn't stop, so I have to keep thinking of something. It kind of ties in with passage a little bit. You want to push yourself too far. Sometimes I have really good limits. And you don't have a body when you can't do. You know, those people like supervisors, especially when you see on there. And so it's just learning to, I think about Michelle, so there's something that you can't do limits.
I'll share. So tasks I do with ease, I feel like managing my relationships, getting along like well with others, friends, colleagues. And I think that is the relator in me, and also learning. I think I enjoy learning about other people, what's going on with them, or what motivates them. So that's definitely an easy one for me. I tend to make very quick decisions, and hopefully that sound judgment is based on fuels those decisions. But it doesn't take me a long time to debate things. I have just an initial thing that I feel very comfortable going with a lot of times. So to me, that's a achiever, arranger, strategic, and handling crises is something that I do. Obviously, as a therapist, that is my daily task, and I don't shy away from them. I run towards the fire. I enjoy that. Again, arranger and relator. For things I struggle with, I think in regards to leadership, I can really improve on being more motivating to others, which positivity and you would really help with. I'm not a cheerleader, but I do try hard, and it's just not a natural one for me. I think innovation is something that I struggle with. I don't tend to be particularly creative, so ideation would be helpful there. And I don't enjoy doing anything that I determine is menial. So probably some positivity, discipline in regards to tasks that I don't put value on would be good for home life. Like grocery shopping, you will never catch me at the grocery store, or laundry, or many tasks at home. I just don't put value to them. I'm sorry, husband.
I have to say, I thought that was super free when you ran into your husband at the grocery store and you told me that you never grocery shop. That's his task, that you won't do it. And I just was like, dang, I need to use that line more.
To defend myself, I will come home with everything he didn't need and nothing he needed. That's the problem.
It's not straight. So I believe that in terms of the exercise tasks I do with these problem solving. And I think that that feedback from my kids, some of the things that they learn to appreciate now that they're out of the house and sometimes calling home is that when they are in a bind, they tend to come to me in terms of, okay, what are the different ways that I can approach this? So it's positive feedback that I've gotten from family members, and I think professionally and other areas, I often will think of several different ways of being able to problem solve and try to tackle things from different directions. So I think that is a strength of mine. Something I struggle with is the opposite root factor. I really tremendously admire how very, I know that Cindy, is in terms of your advocacy for the district, and getting involved with, Bill more recently, and also, as you know, with Jordan, I imagine now that you're doing it too, but I don't know, is the advocacy in political circles, for the district. It's something that, scares me about me, and it's something I don't feel comfortable with. I don't think I'm particularly good at networking, and, I don't, where I do believe I do a good job with relating to people on an individual basis. It's something that I tend to be more socially, I will be that person in the corner who's observing and being very overwhelmed with it.
Okay, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna interrupt this right now. That the funny part is that each learn someone that just you and Chris Lemon connects and all of that, and you don't think that's quote unquote advocacy and politics. That's not true. That's networking, that's talking to people, that's getting feedback, that's listening sessions of what people want to see and hear and what can be changed they want to see for their community, for their school. And so I think you do it, but you think it's supposed to be something bigger. And so I don't think you understand yourself such a
It's out of my community, but you're good at it. I'm just saying.
Well, that is that we do a lot of things that might be really good at it. They're not our top 5 strengths. Or we use some other mixture, like you're using your strategic when you give your reports at Pressline Connect. So there's other strengths that we use. I wrote down, as you were talking networking. Yeah, I wrote down one of the things I enjoy doing is networking. And frankly, the various tasks I put down here, I use all my strengths from the relator to woo, the responsibility, the strategic, the self-assurance, all that fits into being able to network well, or even in my preaching, or even in public speaking, they kind of all work into that. I did write down that one of the things that I struggle with is following the rules. But I do follow them a lot of different times, even though I really oppose them, maybe vehemently so. But then some of my strengths take over to say, okay, but what are you going to do to relate to the people that are there so they don't have to, everyone's wearing a mask, you got to wear a mask or whatever it might be. And I actually didn't have a problem with flu during the epidemic because I was constantly saying hello to people with their masks on and intentionally trying to get them to respond. Wherever you're at, in the post office, walking down the street, hello, how are you? And not allowing them to get away with hiding behind that mask. So I do things to use my strengths to help me with the things I really don't like to do.
Jordan, would you like to say anything?
Put you on the spot.
The tasks I do with these, I think a lot of us, part of the course for a lot of us, but prioritizing tasks, goals, what needs to be done. It's really funny, Bill, that you mentioned that the tasks that you do with these touch all of your 5 areas without realizing it. When I wrote strengths for each of them, it touched all 5 areas. So the second one is problem solving. I think no surprise there, gathering feedback and providing feedback continuously. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about having to be at the farmer's market every weekend is I get people that come up to me and they want to provide feedback and they want to talk about what's going on in the district. And I love hearing it because that's input and learning right there, collecting information, collecting that feedback and being able to understand situations overall. I love being able to understand why something is happening. What is going on? Because everything is so much more complex than any of us give it credit for. The runnings of the school district infinitely complex. So I love when I can see a situation and understand why it's happening. Tasks I struggle with, feelings. I think I learned a lot from Dr. Grimson in her time on the board. I struggle setting logic aside in a lot of cases. I struggle, with overthinking. I don't like I will gladly make a decision that needs to be made on the spot. but I don't like it. It doesn't sit well with me. If I haven't had time to gather enough information, I like to make informed decisions, but such is the world that you can't always, learn everything before you make a decision. And the last thing that I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of us, is stretching myself thin. I really like your point, Michelle, about how are you developing your strengths? I didn't know how to take that question at first, but you had given that example, forcing yourself to sit down and maybe read a book once a month. For me, it's reducing how much I've stretched myself, being able to, I've stretched myself so that there are areas where I'm not allowed to learn everything, be analytical about everything. Right? I should reduce a little bit of that so I can develop and allow myself to use my strengths. So those are mine.
I think that you and I need that t-shirt, just say no, because that's, it's like everybody wants to teach me how to say no and they can't do it. So maybe we need shirts.
It was my New Year's resolution for like 10 years straight. I'm not getting better on it, but it really does not come natural, probably for all. I mean, there's something common in all of us that got us to get here, and I'm guaranteeing that's not the bed we take on a lot.
Why say no?
Yeah, I really admire the boos and the ones, because I often get accused of not smiling enough or not being happy. And I want the mask with a smiley face on it, so they can see that I'm happy. I just have a hard time expressing that. So that's something I'm really jealous about. And I do better at it, but I have to strategically think that when I go into that situation to use my skills to make sure that there's a smile and engaging, more. That's more like you. Yeah. So we are a little over time, and that's because our lunch is late. So, but we're going to take a break. For the audience members that are still watching, we will be back live at 1 o'clock. Then we're going to take our lunch break and potty break, and we'll be back at 1. Thank you.